This is the Storypunks podcast, the show where we talk about all the punks, so Steampunk, Dieselpunk, Cyberpunk, and all the other punks. Today is episode 55, and it will continue with episode 56. It's a two-parter talking about steampunk with podcasters from Sage and Savant. This is a very popular audio drama, and it's an adventure. It's tons of fun. So for all of you who are interested in a peek behind the scenes and frankly, a lot of great advice about podcasting in general, no matter what kind of podcast you might be interested in, you will definitely learn a lot from the Clarks. So I have Eddie Louise and Chip Clark on the show with me, and I'm so thrilled. So before we jump into that, I just want to update you on one last thing that was mentioned in the survey. It was just something that wasn't even on my radar, and maybe because I thought I was kind of covering the space, but I had several different people request that I do a vlog or other content on my YouTube channel. So what I'm going to do is actually offer that through Patreon. I'm going to start doing a vlog as a writer, as a creator, and I'm just going to share a little snippet into what my life is like in that way for my patrons over on Patreon. So don't ever feel pressure to, join Patreon, like you're missing stuff over there. But if you're just looking for more, if you're, you get to the end of the episodes for a week and you're thinking, man, I would love a little more energy or infusion about this or this that I'm creating, then I would love to supply more options, more content. So again, thank you for the wonderful feedback. And I think that's how I'm going to roll it out, because I did have many other people say, hey, I really get a lot from just these updates, please keep doing them. I know it's probably hard I had one person say, I know it's probably hard to think of something to do. And I hope that doesn't come through too much, but yes, sometimes it's hard to know what to share. But I'm glad to hear that it's resonating and that it's helping. I know it helps me with some of the podcasts that I love, and that's why I chose to do it. So there you go. And in that spirit, if you go to the Patreon account that I was just talking about over at patreon.com/storypunks, you can sign up to be a beta reader. And this series, again, is my Norse mythology and steampunk series, Peacock Levine and the Ethereal Fates of Naught. I'm just looking for feedback so that I can continue to refine it before I release it and publish it. And that's about it for my personal update. Here's part 1 of 2. With Sage and Savant. The Tales of Sage and Savant is a monthly audio drama podcast set in a steampunk universe which investigates modern concepts and ideals in a retrofuturistic setting. The lead characters are Dr. Petronella Sage, played by Eddie Louise, and Professor Erasmus Savant, played by Chip Michael. Eddie is the writer of both the audio drama and the series tie-in novels, while Chip handles the audio engineering, sound effects, and music. Described as Frankenstein meets Quantum Leap, the story centers on the experiments of Sage, who is angling to become a fellow at King's College, a fictional university lauded for its medical and historical science departments. The doctor began her investigations into galvanism, which is the study of the application of electricity to human flesh, in an effort to advance the science of limb reattachment. A laboratory accident in episode 101 leads to the doctor discovering time travel, which she dubs Transmigration, declaring that death is no barrier to science. Dr. Sage's closest friend and traveling companion is Professor Erasmus Savant, an expert in archaeological ephemera. His skill lies in identifying and cataloging the smallest or most obscure historical items. Though his first transmigration was accidental, he has embraced the traumatic process of transmigration, his natural enthusiasm for learning new things, overcoming his discomfort at death. Retrofuturism, as explored in these stories, is a mixture of old and new, of future tech reimagined via the avenues of clockwork and steam. The mood of each monthly podcast episode is dictated by the whereabouts of their travel and the characters they encounter there. Sage and Savant blends modern scientific knowledge to make the story plausible, historical research to ensure periods of history are represented in the right light, and Victorian-era hubris to give our characters that era of turn-of-the-century invincibility. Sage and Savant embark on incredible adventures through time. Listen to their story on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or any podcast app. Visit www.sageandsavant.com to get transcripts and learn more about the research that goes into making each episode. So I am so thrilled to have both of these wonderful innovators on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. We're very happy to be here.
Yes.
What are the awesome costume illustrations behind you?
Oh, thank you. These are actually for a book that I'm writing. So a series that I'm writing. It's Norse mythology meets steampunk. Ooh. So it has a lot of the old, you probably can't see that much detail, but like these are the Norns right here. And then I've got, like a dragon character here who will be, around Yggdrasil, the tree and stuff. And
amazing.
This is a fallen Valkyrie over here. So the Valkyries were part like swan. And so she's like a darker bird with a plague mask and stuff. So yeah, thanks for asking.
And we will have a cat join us.
Oh, the perfect extra guest.
This is Freya, speaking of Norse.
Oh my goodness. I was going to say how appropriate.
There was no name we could have given her because she is both the most loving and the most attacking cat I've ever had.
That's Freya. She's a goddess.
Yeah. And she's the goddess of both love and war. And typical in most mythologies, those are separated. But the Norse, they knew. They're two sides of the same coin, right?
Yes. They like to keep it complicated.
Yeah.
Do we have the same mic? Are you using the Yeti?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you've got a different one, but like a different model, but
this
I
is
really
a
liked this
blue
one.
Yeti.
But yeah.
I forget the difference. There's some subtle difference between the black and the gray, the silver, but
yeah.
It's
but they're good basic microphones.
They are. They really are. Oh,
It's not what we use for our recording.
Oh, it's not.
No, we actually use a Rode in 1A. In 1A, something like that. Anyway,
nope, it's just not going to show.
It was about 3-4 times the expense of this one.
I remember seeing that one.
And it's, great sound, but
you're paying for it.
or paid for it, yeah.
Or you paid for it, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's worth it for different tasks. I totally get that. So
the thing is we really wanted the sound to have that kind of quality. Look, we're trying to do an old radio show, so as close to we could get the voices to have that rich ambient noise. And our narrator has got a voice to die for, so
I feel like you all
anything
do.
we can do to improve that.
Okay. Will you tell us a little bit about where you are right now, that wonderful background? You've got this great bookshelf. And is it part of where you create?
It is. We're in Southern California, first of all, and we move a lot. We've been married 39 years and moved 37 times.
Whoa!
The only thing that travels with us are the musical instruments and the books. So we've been creating together as a couple from when we first met way back in high school, and we did a summer production of Shakespeare in the Park.
So romantic.
And the one thing that's been with us along every stage of our journey, no matter what we're creating, whether that's theater or opera or Celtic music, the books and the musical instruments go with us.
And
okay.
This is our house, and yes, we do record our podcast in our house. We can't show it here because we'd have to move everything around, but we have a little area that we actually, some hooks in the ceiling, we throw up some foam and throw a microphone in there. And
our recording studio is literally the little 4x4 entrance hall for our apartment. Wow. And we figured out how to jury rig it into a temporary booth.
Do you have existing photos of this, or could you send them our way? Because I think a lot of people would be interested.
Absolutely. I'm on a podcast server, a Discord server with a bunch of other creators, and I just had a thread on our studio, how it sets up, what materials I used. I can pop that along for you.
The nicest thing is it sets up and or about 5 minutes. So literally it's, there's, we've got the booth set up and we ordered pizza and the pizza guy is here. Well, that's okay. 5 minutes later, it's like, we could let the guy in and eat our pizza. And then 5 minutes later, we're back to recording.
But the whole booth, not counting, of course, the technical, like the microphone and the sound equipment, but the booth itself, less than $50.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that is so cool, because I think a lot of people are on both a budget and also just where do you put this creative endeavor you want to strike out into? So that's really, really cool.
And it was built on the idea that, well, it was a trial and error thing. We were talking also a little earlier, some of the different microphones we have. And the better the microphone you get, the more sound it gets. So,
which means the airplanes flying overhead, the refrigerator in the other room. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the foam was kind of we've got to do something to prevent these sounds from getting here. And then it was like, we have the foam. Now, how do we attach it? And there were lots of, build a plywood fort. No, that's not happening. And ended up going, look, we can just put hooks in the ceiling and voila. And it really does soundproof. You can hear when the pizza guy knocks, but when our neighbors walk up down the sidewalk next to our apartment, don't hear them at all. We hear them outside the booth, but they don't get recorded, which is awesome.
Wow, that's really innovative. It's really surprising. And I love stuff like that. That's just modular and that actually works with your real life.
Yeah.
Very
I wanted
cool.
to be a pirate when I was a kid. And I spent a fair amount of time learning how they lived on ship. And one of the things was that it was a place for everything and everything in its place. So.
And then she married me and nothing is in its place.
Are you chaos?
Oh, in every sense of the word.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been following the tiny house movement, and that's what a lot of this reminds me of, because there's a lot of like, move this to put down your table, move this to pull out your bed, whatever.
Yeah.
So cool. Okay, well, let's talk about your definition of the terms that we have an ongoing conversation about on this show. And we already talked a little bit about this in your bio, but is there anything you'd like to add to the terms steampunk and retrofuturism in particular, or any other terms you'd like to define or contribute to this ongoing conversation?
One of the things that I think is key about the word punk is that it's outside of accepted societal norms. So when I think about my steampunk world, I think first about what were the norms. So the norms in the late Victorian era were very hierarchical, patriarchal, and rigid. So the first thing I did was break the patriarchy and make my main character a woman, working towards a fellowship at a major university, which didn't happen until the 1930s. In fact, Marie Curie, the French scientist, was the first woman whose science was credited in her own name, even after she got married. So that was my first little bit of punk to get in there. It's like, go women.
A woman of my own heart. I love it.
I like the aspect that part of the steampunk genre is this hopefulness. And one of I think the reason that steampunk has such a powerful resurgence at this point is people are looking for something that drives hope. And the whole point of steampunk is to go, wait a minute, where's the hope in doing things right and clockwork, and gee, we can do things that don't destroy the environment, and how amazing is that? We, in the show, while it's based in a steampunk world, we do travel to the future, which allows us then to go into cyberpunk, but yet again taking that sense of going, wait a minute, the future really should have that, let's look forward to it, not this, the world has been destroyed and oh my goodness, isn't this horrible? No, it's...
And cyberpunk often goes into the sort of technical hell, where the machines have taken over, or where all of computers means that our lives are meaningless. I choose to look at it in the other way. What if we use tech for good? And what if a cyber tech future, so for example, I imagine in my portion of the book, which is 2,000 years from the 1890s, I imagine that all of the highways have been turned into strip forests. So imagine, a city like Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York, where all of the roads are forests and the public transportation winds through them in pneumatic form, so there's no emissions. And what would that change our world? Just that one thing.
It would definitely change our commutes.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, my main character in the book is the narrator, Justin, and he walks home from his train station through the forest. And yeah, that's what I want to live.
Like making that a time of joy. Wouldn't that be awesome? And no billboards allowed, I bet.
Exactly. So I think that every form of punk, even cyberpunk, which is often done as so dark, can be imagined as something hopeful and light. So in that way, I'm kind of punking cyberpunk.
Yes, this is what is so cool, because I love hearing everybody's different interpretations. And some people find hope in doing the dystopian approach. They have a different type of hope. Like I've heard it come through, because I'm a little bit more like you myself. And so as I've talked to people that really enjoy the dystopian version of what you're talking about, they actually find a lot of hope in that too. And so it's really interesting to hear some of these same words from different guests. Isn't that interesting?
And especially with wildly different views of what the future might be, or that, yeah.
Yes. I love it. Okay, anything else about retrofuturism, or did we cover it?
The fun thing about retrofuturism is you get to imagine the way that Jules Verne did. Verne and Lovecraft and H.G. Wells are the true spiritual fathers of steampunk. But for them, it was just science fiction, right? They were just imagining a future. And I love retrofuturism because it lets me take a known point in history and then imagine what a future might be from that viewpoint. And that's a really fun thought exercise.
I like, and she doesn't talk about it in the show, but because I do the sound engineering and I go through the shows in depth over and over and over again, I really love the sense of, we've gone to this point in history, and in season 2, we get the opportunity to go to the first women's convention. And at that point, Dr. Sage and Abigail are having this conversation of like, oh, this is the roots of where this all went. But there's an undercurrent there, which is also talking about, they have a world where women have achieved, but they're also talking about the things that women haven't achieved, and they're topical today. That, wow, we still haven't had a women's president, and we still haven't had, there still isn't feminine equality in the workplace.
Mind-blowing to think that in 1846 in Seneca Falls, the women got together and demanded not only the vote, but the chance to run for federal office and for the presidency. And I think they'd be aghast that, 175 years later, we still haven't managed that peace.
I completely agree. There's like this really slow rollout for a lot of history. And I think sometimes with retrofuturism, we can like get over it already.
Right.
Yes. And that's exactly the point, is kind of looking at that and going, wait a minute, this world has changed, but has it really?
And maybe by showing a world where it changed faster, we can help move our own along a little faster. I think that has a huge effect in science fiction, especially. Mary Robinette Kowal, who's not series, that they're up for Hugo, by the way, she's amazing. But the newspapers turned to her this last week when it was announced that the all-female spacewalk wouldn't be happening. And she had to explain that it isn't deliberate sexism. It's, I don't know, for lack of a better term, ignorant sexism. The spacesuits that are up on the space station were sent up in the 1970s when the space station was still built, and there were no women astronauts.
I've seen some of her pictures in her feed. She was a guest on this show, and to see everything when she went and visited NASA and so many other sites, so cool. That's maddening, though.
Right. And the thing is, they sent up those suits expecting them to last 12 years. And they're still in service. And they've never had enough trained women on the space station at one time that two might have gone walking together. So for the first time, this went, oh. You can bet they'll be sending new suits that are women appropriate up now. So fiction gives us a chance to kind of highlight these things. Maybe we can catch them before they're a public relations nightmare for things like NASA.
Oh my goodness, we can hope. That is really fascinating, though. I'm really glad you shared that story. That's what we're here to talk about, to correct, to revel in, is how can we explore the hope instead?
Yeah.
Because I think we need that. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So Dr. Sage refers to time travel as transmigration. I love this term. So I want to know from you any historical precedent or how you came up with the term or the concept. Is it from history? Did you extrapolate it from other things that existed?
Do you know about the Theosophists?
No.
Theosophists were actually a type of scientist in the late Victorian era, which was kind of investigating, for lack of a better word, the science of the human soul. The rest of science was kind of just choosing to ignore spiritual things and saying, and eventually, church and science completely separated. But the Theosophists were looking for this opportunity to investigate scientifically the presence of the human soul.
So I think in Gail Carriger's book, Soulless, there was a Theosophist. Am I saying it right? Theosophist?
Yes, Theosophist.
Theosophist, who was trying to weigh the soul, or maybe I'm conflating two things, but
yes, no, exactly. That was one of the experiments that was a big part of that era, is they would weigh a person before death and then wait till they died and weigh them again and try the formula that would describe the weight of consciousness or the soul. In addition, oral photography and many things like that came out. Now, of course, as in any sort of human investigation, there were also the crazies out on the far side who were, really into the woo-woo. But in the hard science, they were investigating astral travel and trying to discover how to separate the consciousness from the physical form. They called that the migration of souls. So in Shakespearean form, I decided to create my own word, and I mashed together trans, which is between two, and migration, because Dr. Sage leaves her own body and goes into another body. So she's not astral traveling, she's transmigrating.
Oh, I love that. And I love when authors or creators take the liberty of creating their own words. It's really fun.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. Okay, well, let's talk about the actual format of the show, and then we'll get back to some of the storyline stuff. But audio drama, it's undeniably rich. There's so much going on. And I think the voice is so intimate. You know, it's in people's ears while they're doing something else in their day. And then it's a lot of work, to be honest.
Yeah.
But how did you come to choose this for your story? I mean, it's obviously has a lot to offer, but why did you choose this? And I say that knowing that you do have a book as well.
Yeah. The book came later, and the audio drama we kind of fell into. First of all, the idea from the story came to me in a dream, which I know is horribly cliched, but I dream super vivid, very cinematic dream. And in my dream, I am often not myself. I'm a character of some sort. And so I dreamed I was a scientist. I was dressed in late Victorian wear. I was in a laboratory that looked like the one from Young Frankenstein. And I was deliberately setting up an experiment and then electrocuting myself. And I would wake up like with my heart pounding. And this went on every night for about 2.5 weeks.
Why did you get a lot of sleep?
Chip in the dream? Yeah.
So I finally decided I had to write to understand why would somebody do this, because I knew it was an experiment, not a suicide.
Now we're going to take a side note and go. Eddie and I have done a number of projects together. The early 90s, we attempted to write a musical together that was moderately successful. We didn't get divorced. That's a plus. We went the dot-com bubble bust in 2000, and all of a sudden we found ourselves going back to university to study music. And oh yes, by the way,
there's Freya the cat.
Talked about, yes. Hello, kitty.
I learned music by ear, so I didn't have any of the terminology. So college was so that I could get the words to tell him why he was doing something wrong.
And so that if we chose to do a music, it didn't end up getting the stress that we had the first time. So anyway, we've done a number of projects together. We also realized about 3 years ago that, wow, it had been a number of years since we'd done something together. Because of the experience with the musical, we're like, wow, probably better not try writing a book together. Maybe that's not a good idea. She came up with a story and she says, I've got this, but how do we do this together? And I'm like,
at the time, I'm thinking like guerrilla filmmaking, right?
And I'm like, yeah, I
read this story.
I have no film skills whatsoever that would do this. And then going, the sets, the costumes, the locations would just be beyond. And she's, well, could we do an audio drama? And
I was listening to Welcome to Night Vale, and I was addicted.
And I'm like, okay, well, I've already got the sound engineering stuff. We didn't have all of the equipment that we have now, but we had a
basic setup.
We had a basic setup. And so it's like, sure, let's throw this together. We asked a friend if he wanted to be the narrator, and that must have worked out.
A kind of a funny point how Justin Bremer, our narrator as a person, is also Justin Bremer, the narrator in the book and in the podcast, because I asked him, do you want me to give you a different name as the narrator? And he went, no, you could just use my name.
That's kind of fun. I like that.
So there he is. Now he's a real life Justin Bremer, and he's also a character in my audio drama and in my book. And that's the thing is, it was very much just, okay, we've never done this before, but what's the worst that can happen? We fall on our face and nobody listens. And then that idea can go out the window and we can try a better idea. But we lucked out that from the very first, we had a lot of listeners get connected, and then we were getting messages on Twitter saying, oh, I can't wait to find out what happens next month. So that kept me writing.
Okay, Storypunks, let's break here. And you know what? I actually realized after recording this intro, I have one more thing to report to you from the survey, and it's a very important thing. So thank you for permitting me to not go back and re-record. Instead, I'm going to mention it here as our intermission. And this may make some of you happy or glum, probably not full on glum. But some of you were enjoying the recommendations of products that made a lot of sense to me that punk creators would enjoy or find a lot of use from. But the feedback that overshadowed all of that was that people were annoyed by it. And I think it's just because we've been a little bit saturated with bad advertising. Personally, that's what I think is going on there, because I do think it's relevant. I do think that it was helping people find stuff, but I also want to be open, and even if it goes against what I personally think. And so in this case, I'm going to eliminate the resources that I was pointing people to. So I can't believe I forgot that earlier. That's kind of a big thing. So I had it like written lower on my list and it got obfuscated. So that pretty much wraps up the survey. We'll just call it a day with that. And that takes us right to the end of this episode, the end of part 1. So obviously we still have more coming with this conversation. And when you get time, please join back for episode 56.